So yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Zero Infrastructure Data Distribution Portal. And if you've been following along our JavaScript talks, we've done a couple now. You might have seen this graphic before. And the reason I wanted to bring it up today is because today we're going to be talking about the top of this pyramid. We're going to be talking about solutions, specifically portals. And the way we see solutions is that they are full-featured applications that really target common problems in research data management. So the solutions we build and the solutions that I'll be showing today are all built on the same basis that our web application and our other services are built up from. So we build these with the intent to both use the platform and use the platform in a way that is consistent with how our team internally is using them. Portals specifically, we see as having two sort of guiding objectives. We see the portals that we provide as a way to promote best practices and adhere to fair data principles. And we also see them as a way to lower the barrier to entry to provide Globus-based web experiences. If you've used portals in Globus in the past, you might be familiar with the Globus sample data portal. So this is a Python-based implementation of the modern research data portal design pattern. And from an implementation perspective, it's written in Python, which means you have to have some familiarity with the language. But it also requires you to understand how to both deploy, maintain a Python web-based application. From the user experience perspective, the sample data portal uses the Globus helper pages to actually initiate transfers. One of the issues that this causes is from a UX perspective is that it actually creates a scenario where users are taken out of the application, taken to the Globus web application, then taken back to the portal, which can cause some confusion. And from what we've heard as far as users using this and both using our helper pages can often lead to users getting lost in how to actually achieve the tasks that they came to accomplish. One of the primary things that I want to point out about the Python data portal is it actually does require you to have managed infrastructure to actually host the portal itself. So this is a diagram that basically it's maybe trimmed down a bit depending on how you might have implemented this portal yourself. But the idea is that when a user makes a request from their device, we'll say a web browser, they're making a request to the Python data portal. That Python application is sitting on infrastructure somewhere. In a lot of cases, it is infrastructure that your institution has to manage. The Python data portal then makes requests to the Globus platform. I mentioned the helper pages, but it also makes requests to Globus auth, Globus transfer, back to the Python data portal, and eventually to your Globus Connect server installation or your Science DMZ or other Globus endpoints. But again, the main thing I want to point out here is that it requires a server for hosting and serving the application. Now, on paper, this looks simple, but from an actual implementation perspective, this can be pretty complex. I do want to underline that the sample data portal is a valid example for providing a portal experience for users. We just believe that we can do better. And that's where we're bringing in the template data portal. So first, I want to talk about the user experience of the template data portal. The user experience is very similar to the Python data portal, but we've trimmed it down a bit with the idea of really making it catered to what we see as the target use case for this type of portal. So now you list the directory contents, you can configure what directory and collection the user is able to browse. The searching for a destination collection is all done within the application itself. So there's no redirect to the actual Globus web app. And then there's also some other niceties around better error handling, different UI. And we've really tried to take a lot of our learnings that we have from our web application and put them into the portal itself. But the user experience is just one aspect of this implementation. And really today, I want the focus to be on how easy it is to distribute and maintain these portals. And the best way to do that is to go through a live demo and actually set one up. Oops. I'm going to switch over to GitHub. And here on GitHub, I just have the template data portal repo open. So this is just a GitHub repository. There's a README in here with instructions walking through all the things that I'm going to be walking through today and setting up this portal. But the template itself is actually an example of the portal. So I have a link here. This is just my GitHub pages URL where I can actually see the result of the template and what's being built. So in the template, I configured my collection to the ALCF Eagle, where I have some tutorial information on. I can interact with this, but this is already pre-configured. And actually, this isn't what I want. I want to create my own and really configure it to my own collection and to my own Globus application. So in order to do that, I'm going to use this template. I'm going to create a new repository from the template. Let's just call it Joe's data. Oh, I already have one. Name that, of course. So let's call it Joe's data portal. What's happening now is it's taking that template that we provided and creating a new repository in my own user account. So this might actually be your institution account. This might be your personal GitHub account. Really, it's any GitHub account where you want to clone this to that makes sense based on your use case. So now that I've cloned the repository, I have to do a couple of things to actually make the portal my own. So in the repository, there is this static.json file. And this essentially is where all the configuration for the portal comes from. You'll see there's a lot of information. There are a lot of different properties in here that relate that I could change to actually augment what I want the portal to look like and how I want it to function. But really the important ones are these Globus parameters. So what I need to do is I actually need to configure this application to, or I need to configure my portal to be configured to a Globus application that I own. So when people are asked to authenticate, they're asked to authenticate with the application I've configured. And then I also want to change that collection that it's pointing to. If you recall, it's initially configured to ALCF, but I actually have set up my own guest collection somewhere else that I wanted to point it to. I can also configure a path if I want. And there's also some other configuration values that are not listed here that I'll show later on. But let's just get an up and running example, and then we'll kind of work from there. So I'm actually just going to edit this file within the GitHub UI. So I just went to the little pencil icon, and so now I can edit it. So now I need my Globus application client ID. So in order to get that client ID, I have to go over to the web application where I've already set up a project. And I've actually already set up an application too, but let's set up a new application. So I'm going to add an app. I'm going to register a public OAuth client. So it's register a thick client or script. Let's give it a new name. For today. So that's my app name. You probably want to do something a little more descriptive. And the only information I actually need to make this work is I need to make sure I give a redirect URL that will be used in my GitHub page that winds up being released. So I actually have my GitHub pages configured to use a CNAME on my account, which means it's going to wind up using a custom domain. So my custom domain is actually my first name, last name.com. And then I am going to set up the repository name and then /authenticate. This /authenticate path is a path that is automatically provided by the portal itself. So this host and path prefix is really just dependent on where your GitHub page is going to be hosted. If you're not using a CNAME, it's going to be github.io/your repo. If you are, it's going to be whatever you have your CNAME configured to. This is definitely one of the more advanced configurations, and there's some helpful instructions around this within the README. If you're using custom CNAMEs or where you should get this value from. But I happen to know this value is going to be this URL, so let's fill that out. And I'm going to go ahead and register this app. So now that I've registered the application in Globus, I'm going to grab my client UUID, go back to GitHub, and paste my client ID, making sure I don't take away any quotes. And then now let's configure our collection. So I mentioned I had a collection set up, and let's take a look at this guest collection I have. So I have a guest collection. This is on a completely different endpoint. I'm going to grab the UUID of this collection and paste it here. And for this collection, I actually don't need to supply a path. So I'm just going to get rid of the path. I'm going to go ahead and commit those changes. We'll use the default commit message there. And when I run this, it's actually going to fail because I forgot that I need to do two things to my repository before I deploy my page. But we'll wait and we'll let it fail so we can get that feedback right away, or as soon as GitHub gives us the feedback. The settings that I need to change in order to make sure that the application is launched automatically are that I need to make sure that the repository is configured to allow GitHub pages or GitHub actions to release my pages. And then I also need to make sure that my pages are configured for HTTPS because Globus auth is going to require that those are HTTPS requests when making the authentication request. So in order to do that, I'm going to go into my settings. I'm going to go to pages. And from the build and deployment, I'm going to say GitHub actions. And so this basically allows my GitHub pages to be built and deployed from GitHub actions. And I mentioned I will need to enforce HTTPS because I will be using Globus auth. So now that I have made those changes, we'll go back to the page. We'll see that first failure that happened there because I didn't have that configured. So in order to rebuild this, I could do one of two things. I could either make a change to that static.json, or I can go into my actions and I can actually just rerun this build. Let's go into the view workflow here and let's rerun. So one of the things that this deployment process and infrastructure allows us to do and puts it really into the hands of the person maintaining these portals is the ability to really control the deployment and really control these portals in a way that's very familiar. We've specifically chosen GitHub actions, GitHub pages for the familiarity of the platform and its wide use. It's also obviously very well known within the open source community. So it's something that shouldn't feel very foreign. From the implementation perspective and the build process that we built on top of this, on top of GitHub actions, it's all standard GitHub actions. It's all standard GitHub pages. So we've really tried to make sure that we're not doing anything that doesn't meet the standards of the platform itself to make it easy to both eject from the platform that we built, but then also make it easy to learn and easy to find resources when you do have questions about how things work, or if you want to extend in any way. So right now, we're literally just waiting for the GitHub action to run. It just finished. We'll see my GitHub pages URL was actually generated here. So when I click this, I'll be taken to a page. So this page, this is the first page that we see based on what I have configured. I'm signed out. I haven't configured anything to be displayed here. That's another configuration option that I could provide. I should have actually renamed it. Maybe we'll do that in just a second too, but why don't I sign in? You'll see when I sign in, I'm presented with the client that I configured. That's the name of the client that I configured. It's asking for consents based on what this portal does. So it's asking for some transfer consent, some information about my user identity in order to use the application for us to be able to identify the user. I'm going to go ahead and hit allow. And then once I allow that, you'll see that I'm taken to a portal very similar, exactly similar to the one we saw. But the main difference being that we're pointing at the collection that we've configured as opposed to the collection that was configured in the template. Now I mentioned let's change the title because obviously we've diverged from the template itself. So what I can do now, if I go back into that static.json file, let's go ahead and edit this file again. And let's call it Joe's Data Portal. And we'll commit those changes, again, keeping the GitHub provided commit message there. And once that change is made, a new build process would be kicked off. I can go into the GitHub action to see the status of this and get detailed status of what's occurring here. And we'll just wait for this to finish, and then we should see that change on our portal. While it's finishing, I am actually going to switch back over to my slides. I want to point out the infrastructure and just talk about what one of the major changes here from the infrastructure perspective is. What we've done is by utilizing GitHub Pages and utilizing this build process of using GitHub Actions, is we've actually eliminated the need for infrastructure at deployment or runtime. So by GitHub Pages hosting the application, you no longer have to host the portal on your own infrastructure. It can be hosted on GitHub Pages itself. By using GitHub Actions, you don't have to think about, what is the deployment process of your portal anymore. You can just rely on the fact that the portal is configured to automatically deploy when you make changes to that static.json file. So really, the way we see this is that we've really lowered the barrier to entry to having a portal to editing a JSON file and having a familiarity with the GitHub UI. Obviously, there's a couple of different GitHub features that we're using here that having some knowledge of, GitHub Actions, GitHub Pages, is worthwhile, but you really don't need to know what's going on under the hood to make this happen. The only thing you need to make your own portal is to be able to create a repository from the template, make some adjustments to that static.json file, and then let the action handle everything else. It looks like our update finished, so we could actually see, if I do a refresh here, we'll see that my portal is distributed again with that update that we made to the static.json file. There's a lot of other features that we have within the portal that I'm not going to have time to demo today. But one of the things that we are providing is the ability to theme and brand the portal. So you have the ability to change the color scheme. You can provide your own color palette entirely to change the theming based on your specific branding needs. You can also provide a brand image to add an image to the mast, really just trying to make it so that you can create a portal that fits your institution's requirements and really make it feel like a portal that your institution has built and allows your users to use or blesses your users to use in some way. The other thing that we've really taken under consideration in this implementation of portals is the lifecycle support of these portals. So with the example portal that we have out there in Python, one of the things that we've seen is we've presented it as an example, but I think we have also seen it actually become a production use application as far as just taking the code base and running it on a server. And that does work well, but there are problems as far as getting updates out to those distributions that exist out there that we're just not aware of. And it just wasn't intended to be updated or used in that way. Maybe you configured your portal in a way where you're using our application as a Git submodule and you're updating the application in some way that keeps you in sync with those changes. But we just saw this as we could do better, right? And so one of the ways that we are doing this is by using Dependabot within GitHub. And so what happens when you create your own repository is there is a Dependabot script that will run. And when an update is made to the base portal code, it'll actually open a PR on your portal repository. You then have the option to either merge that or just deny it and close it out. But merging that, what that will do is that will automatically merge in those changes or update from the updated code base and redeploy your site. So this is super useful because basically it means that we at Globus can keep adding functionality, keep improving the experience, and you as a downstream consumer of the template portal can decide what's right for your users as far as updating, adding bug fixes. And so we will and do follow Simber for these updates. So we really want to make sure you are presented with what's changing and how those changes will impact you. But most of the time, we really want to just be able to say, these are good improvements, just update them and relaunch your code. In this example here, so from version 1.130 to 1.4, we added the ability to actually add a new folder within the destination browser. So these are just kind of examples of small little tweaks that we're constantly thinking about and improving and how we can get them down to downstream consumers. Looking ahead a bit, so in addition to the data portal that was presented today, we also do provide a search portal. The search portal is a little different in that the solution that it is targeting is the idea that you have data in a Globus search index and this data might actually reference other data in collections, or the data in the search index might be the data itself. But the idea is that you can create an experience for browsing that search index. And an upcoming feature, it will actually allow you to transfer that data through the portal as well. So this type of thing is an example where we see the platform and these portals evolving together. We see the search portal as a way to help users find data, but then also act on the data they find. And like I mentioned, using that Dependabot and lifecycle support, you can have that all within this ecosystem. So with that, really, if from the presentation side of things, I have a couple examples of the lifecycle support and what that workflow looks like. But the important thing I think here is, as far as how to get started with these and start using them within your institution, these template repositories exist. And so that workflow that I went through today of creating a new repository from that template, configuring it to my client application, and configuring it to my Globus collection, that can all be done today. You can experiment with it, see if it fits your needs. I mentioned that search portal example. So that would be if you have a Globus search index out there that you want users to be able to actually configure and view what's in your index. I did mention that transfer integration is on the roadmap and coming soon. Both of these repos have information about the different configurations that are both currently supported and will be supported. I mentioned theming, I mentioned branding. That's all in the documentation there. But if you can't find anything, or you can't find what you're looking for, or if you need something that configured, or you need something configurable that isn't configurable, feel free to open an issue on the repos themselves. We'll respond to those, and we will do our best to get the different customization features implemented. If you can't figure out where to place an issue, or if you just want to reach out to support directly, support@globus.org, we'll get that trafficked over to us, and then we can get that resolved as well.
I think I'll throw a question that some of the users might be interested in. How much of the actual data, let's say I'm hosting the application of the static, this template data portal, how much of the data does of my data does GitHub see?
How much of the data does GitHub see? So the only data that GitHub sees is the files that are in your actual repository, right? The actual data, where as far as where an LS occurs, interacting with the data you're searching to see, that's happening in the end user's web browser. So that's no different than them opening up the Globus web application. The files themselves that are hosted on the GitHub Pages server or the GitHub Pages or wherever static hosts you wind up hosting these, it's just the information that's in your static.json file. So there's no additional data that's pulled in at build time. So that does mean you should be maybe cautious about what you name your portal. You might, if that is considered PII in some way for your institution. But other than that, the actual data, the communication is between the user's browser, Globus, your Science DMZ, very, very similar to how the web application works.
Cool.